Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for the next part of my playthrough of a full mission from Duel in the Dark with all the expansions thrown in. Um, Now I'm just going to dive straight in from where we left off. I think I was slowed down a bit by the necessary strategic and introductory preamble in the last video, but I'm hoping with this one to just carry on with the turns, maybe a bit of commentary and thoughts on options and what's going on, but otherwise we'll see how the game turns out. So it's the beginning of a new round, and it starts with the British making a decision about their mosquitoes. So we have the one that's hovering in the North Sea. And from the British perspective, on the one hand, you do want to fly ahead of your bomber stream in order to offer them some protection. But at the same time, you can also expensively mislead the Luftwaffe as to what your intentions are. So it might be worth going for a bit of that. It sometimes can be a rather tough decision. But I think this time the British are going to play a little bit conservatively. So they are going to actually fly their Mosquito over there. And the reasons for that will become clear in a bit. Now, over to the west, the the British have a shrewd idea that the German Heinkel 177, having ineffectively tried to bomb Falmouth over there, is probably just going to dash back to its airfield. Now, if they wanted to, the British could move to intercept the Germans, basically pursuing them back over the channel and hounding them back to their airfields. But there is a risk involved in doing that, because if they do, they might be leaving the rest of their area unguarded. And if the Germans launch their V weapons this turn, that could be problematic. So it's pros and cons, really. If the British move the Mosquito there and they're correct, not only will they shoot down a couple more 177s, but they may also be in a position to intercept that V weapon when it takes off. Although, actually, no, you can't. Sorry, my bad. You can't intercept the... no, you can. Sorry, I'm confusing mosquitoes and anti-aircraft guns. Ignore me, ignore me. That would actually be a good move for the British, but it would lay the rest of their territory open to the V weapons going over with no air cover. So it is a bit of a tough one, but I think as the Brit, I would bank on a certainty rather than the uncertainty of hovering. So they're going to do the aggressive thing, and they're going to hope they're right by making a move over here. They could, if they wanted to, go at low altitude to bomb and strafe the airfield as well. In fact, I think they might do that, because if it's a matter of, swings and roundabouts, you're going to make life miserable for the German bomber crews one way or another. So the Mozzie on that duty is going to expend one of its bomb markers to show that it's made a low-level attack on that German airbase over there. So that's it. That's the British Mosquitoes done. It's now the turn of the German night fighters to decide what they're going to do. So moving our attention back to the center of the map, let's start with Squadron 1. Now, the Germans do have some painful choices because they have to guess where those British bombers are going, which is a bit tricky. They could go in any one of those three directions ahead of them. Now, the Germans discount the northern North Sea. There's no way that any of their interceptors could get out there fast enough to be in position. So it really leaves their closest aircraft with a choice of this hex or this hex. Now, the problem with going into this one is that as they're positioning themselves for an attack on the bombers, they will run straight into the Mosquitoes up there. So that will inevitably cause them a loss of victory points. But the trade-off, of course, is if the bomber stream then slams into them, there will be a lot of British casualties. So again, it's a difficult choice. If I were the German, I would guess, well, you can't afford to discount the possibility that the target of that raid may be one of the North German coastal cities. I mean, Emden is right over there. So maybe let's take a chance on this. So Squadron 1 is going to burn more fuel. This is the other thing, they do have to keep an eye on their fuel gauges. They're going to go in there. Squadron 2 down here is going to move in parallel, but is just going to cover that southern bit, just in case the bomber stream turns south. Or southwest, I should say. Southeast, southeast. I do know my directions, honestly. Right, what are we going to do with Squadron 3? Squadron 3 is a bit out of position as well. This is really annoying. I might, just as a preliminary move, put Squadron 3 over Emden, because that way they don't burn so much fuel from flying directly into the wind. And they're still near some air bases if they have to put down quickly for refueling. And finally, Squadron number 4, the Dorniers here, will climb to high altitude and enter this hex as well. There's going to be some pain in a minute for them, and we'll just knock his fuel down a bit. As for Squadron 5 over here, the Heinkel 219s, I think we will send them... good question. Might as well send them to join the defense of Emden, just in case it's necessary. So they too will burn a bit more fuel, and they're down to 8. So that is all the German night fighters now. Now, because they've entered a zone with a Mosquito, we have to see how much it costs them. So we look at our table here. We have German interceptors, and the Mosquito can fight against a maximum of 2 fighters. So it only gets 2 victory points. Well, there were only 2 coming in. So 1 for each fighter. No advantage for the weather conditions. They are in clouds, so it's a -1. No searchlights or anything like that. They're over the sea. And nobody's at low altitude. So that just netted the British 1 victory point. That could have been a lot more painful. So the British have 6 VP. Right, let's see where the bombers are going. I'll start with that formation up there. The Germans largely guessed right. The British are trundling ever eastwards, which means the Germans have managed an interception, and the British are going to lose some of those victory points now. Also, it's time for the grand reveal. Is this the real raid or the spoof raid? It is, in fact, the spoof raid. So not as many bombers as they were expecting to find, which is a bit of a disappointment, but they'll just have to live with that. Oops, sorry, camera focus. Come on, camera. Thank you. That's all. I'll go in a bit closer so you can see what's going on in that now very crowded hex over there. So we have a bomber stream that has flown into an area occupied by German fighters. So it's a total of 4 German victory points so far, because they've got 2 fighter squadrons in there. There is a cloud, so it's down to 3. No land-based defenses. The Germans aren't at low altitude. But it's a further -1 because it's the spoof raid, so that's 2. And the Brits are at high altitude. So net German total of 2 victory points means the British VP total has dropped to 4, because of course it's a sliding scale. So what about the other British formation, which is now very obviously the main raid? The British don't have to pretend anymore. They are finally taking off. So let me back out a little bit again so we get the strategic situation back. So the main British bomber formation is heading eastwards, and they are going to go straight to high altitude. Okay, so the plot thickens and the game is afoot. Now, what about the poor old German Heinkel 177 way over here to the west? Well, drawing their card, which is the last card in their movement deck, they are indeed heading straight back to their airfield in northern France. There's going to be a tiny bit of pain for them now. So they come in and they land, but a whole load of nasty things are going to happen. So they fly into a space occupied by the Mosquito. That's 1 VP for the Brits. Local conditions don't help either way. There's no German anti-aircraft defenses. And the Mosquito was high, so it's a good interception. It's 1 victory point. The other thing is the Germans have landed on a bombed airfield. So that's another victory point for the British. So Brits get back their 2 victory points. I also realized, sorry, and I must actually knock off one of those British victory points. If I turn the camera back this way slightly, you can see the British main raid took off from a fog-bound airfield. So that gives the Germans a victory point, because if any Brit aircraft takes off or lands in fog, it causes problems. Now, you might be wondering why I based the British formation there. Because of the nature of the setup of this game, which I do explain in my other videos, both players have to commit their forces before fully knowing what conditions will be on the night of the raid. So I placed my British bombers over there thinking it would be a good staging point for where we wanted to go. And then, much to my horror, when the time came to launch, we found that we were in fact, unfortunately, fog-bound. So we had to proceed with the mission anyway, but there we go. So the Heinkel 177 has landed and is effectively out of it for the rest of the night. There will be no more turns for that aircraft, probably much to the relief of their crews. They've had a terrible night. But what about the V weapons? Are any of them going to be taking to the skies? And the answer is no. The Germans are still playing that card very close to their chests. So that's it. We've had another full turn. The picture for both the British and the Germans is becoming a bit clearer now. The Germans are glad that they know which is the spoof raid. The British are glad that they won't have to worry about the Heinkel 177s anymore. So that is a bit of a relief, but those V weapons are a bit of a concern. So back to the top of the round, and it's the British Mosquito again. And what do they want to do? They are going to go on a bit of a pattern of misdirection, I think. This could be quite fun. So for the moment, they are going to move 2 spaces southwards, and they're going to go low and bomb this airfield. So there are no German flak defenses there, so the RAF has a wonderful time making a glorious mess of that airfield there. That will hurt any German night fighters that try to land later. The British other Mosquito lurking around over here realizes it can't do much more over here, but in the interest of hedging its bets, it's going to move up this way and climb to high altitude again, in the hope that by placing itself between all the various V-weapon launch sites, it will be in a position to intercept them when they finally do launch. They really want to be heading over to see if they can cause mayhem and help the bombers, but they want to keep an eye on those. So now didn't mean to move that. So that's the British fighters. What about the German night fighters? And I am, as I say, going to have to start paying a little bit of attention to fuel now. The Germans are in a bit of a bind at the moment because they know that this is the spoof raid and they've all been suckered up northwards, whereas the British main raid is happily crossing over here. Um, Squadron 1, way up there, is going to try and hedge its bets a little bit because they're also keeping an eye on their fuel gauges. So what they're going to do is they're going to move southeast and come over here. They don't lose any points because there's none of those horrible mosquitoes hanging around. They have a 1 in 3rd chance of intercepting the spoof raid again, and it also places them in a slightly better position for intercepting what they now know is the British main raid. And so they burn more fuel. It's getting to the point where if they want to stay in the air, they may have to start marking time rather than zooming around the map. What is Squadron 2 going to do? Squadron 2 is up there at the moment. There is a temptation for them to stay there just in case the British do turn that way. But it is a bit chancy. The other thing the Germans want to do is they want to make sure that their squadrons don't run out of fuel at the same time because there's never enough airfields to go round. So what Squadron 2 might do is loiter in that hex and just spend half a fuel line. Because yes, if they're correct and the British were just shamming and suddenly decide to turn north, then they'll be in a good place to intercept them. Some poor fellow is going to have to deal with the path directly ahead of them. The question is, who is it going to be? Now, what they might do is pull Squadron 3 way up there over Emden because they have the special fuel which can get them down there. They will run out of fuel, but they will be in position to intercept the British bombers, and then they'll have to land at the start of their next turn. They will suffer from landing at a bombed airfield, but it might be worth it. So, yep, Squadron 3 is going to zoom all the way down from Emden, burning their special fuel as they do so. So the MW50 goes to used, and they eat through their entire reserve. But it does mean they're in a good position if the main raid decides it's just going to carry on. What about Squadrons 4 and 5? Squadron 4, it's a bit of an easy one. They might just move to cover Emden. Or maybe, just in case they're going to sneak off somewhere, Squadron 5 will actually head off just in case. And sorry, Squadron 4 I did say, didn't I? Yeah, the blue guys. And Squadron 5 will just loiter over Emden, so they'll just burn half a fuel line. And they are just going to stay there, reinforcing the defences of Emden. Now, $64,000 question, have the Germans guessed right? I'll do the spoof raid first. The Germans have guessed right. In fact, the spoof raid is going to chuck out a whole load of window in the next hex they enter, so it's probably fairly obvious that they are heading over Emden. So window is one of the nice optional additions in this game, and it's quite fun because it basically, as it did historically, some of the bombers drop huge amounts of aluminium foil to confuse the German radar defenses. Now I realise I've got ahead of myself again because I forgot to resolve the interception down there. So before I deal with window and all that other stuff, let's just see what happens to the German Squadron 3 when it moves into the Mosquito zone. So 1 VP for the British. Weather is not a factor except for the cloud, which reduces it to 0, unfortunately for the Brits. And the Brits are actually at low altitude because they were bombing the airfield. So actually, they end up with a -1. So the Germans get the better of that exchange, and the British are back down to 4 victory points. Now, what horrendous stuff is going to happen up here? Window has some very interesting effects. German night fighters lose a victory point if the British disgorge Window in a hex. German radar is rendered useless and scores no points. And searchlights do not give extra victory points to flak, but it does give some help to individual fighters on a one-for-one basis. So they will be able to help there a bit. So let's see what horrendousness is going to happen. Also, the British have declared that they are not bombing Emden. Emden is not the target. So British bomber stream has flown into a German night fighter. So it's two for the night fighter and one for the ground flak, which Emden has got. Oh, in fact, actually, Emden might have more. Let me just put my glasses on. No, Emden only has one unit of ground flak, luckily for the British. So it's, yes, 3 altogether. It's a completely clear night with no clouds or anything. The searchlight helps the fighter. The radar is useless because of window. Everyone's at high altitude. The Germans get -1 because it's the spoof raid, so there aren't that many bombers to shoot down. So that's 3 victory points for the Germans, just for the British passing over all that horrendousness, which knocks the British down to 1 victory point. That nice early lead they had a second ago is beginning to get eroded. Now, what about the main raid? Where is the main raid going? Ah, okay, the Germans have been nicely foxed there. So those poor German fighters blundered into the Mosquito for no good purpose, really, because the British are turning south, or at least southeast. So that's the British bombers. No Heinkel 177. And what are the German V weapons going to do? Aha, we have a launch. The blue and the yellow have launched. So after keeping the British on tenterhooks for ages, let's see what happens. So the first V weapon takes off. They're always at low altitude. And their first action is simply to take off. So they take off. British ground defenses cannot intercept a V weapon when it's only taking off. So there's no response from them. But the Mosquito does get a chance to have a swipe at it. So looking at the chart, V weapon has launched into, oh no, I left the Mozzie at high altitude. So no, there is no interception. Oh dear, that was a bit of bad judgment on the British part. So nothing is intercepting that V weapon to start with. And of course, there are no British units in the neighbouring hex where the other V weapon is taking off. So, oh dear, that is not so good. Never mind, one lives and learns. So next turn, it's up to the Mosquitoes again. Now, the ones here are going to regain high altitude. Or actually, no, maybe they won't. No, they are just going to nip over and cause mayhem at another German airfield. So they will very, very gleefully do more low-level bombing and strafing just to mess up the German infrastructure. Now, over here, where the defence of Britain is slightly coming apart at the seams, The British have a difficult decision to make because the Mosquito has to be in the V weapons inbound hex to intercept them. Because these two have activated, the British are going to take a chance and position the Mosquito, this time remembering to keep it at low level here, and hope that if these guys are heading crossover for any of the industrial cities above, then they'll be in the right position to intercept them. If they've guessed wrong and they're just going for an easy win against places like Weymouth, then there'll be lots of red faces on the British side of it. So what about the German night fighters? Because they have some tricky decisions to make this turn. Now, they really do want to concentrate most of their strength against the British main raids. They're a bit out of position, really, but they do have some options. Squadron 1, who is rather short of fuel, is going to reluctantly use... Oh, actually, no, it has some good... It's going to use one of its fuel lines, flying with the wind, to take it over here. Now, the reason it's doing that is looking at its southward possibilities, it can't really get itself anywhere in time to intercept the probable track of the British main raid yet. But if it goes there, there's a 1/3 chance they could intercept the British spoof raid. So that might be where... Oh, sorry, I realise I'm talking about things that are happening off camera. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so they've moved there so that they're in a better position to intercept the British spoof raid rather than ending up in the sort of middle area where they won't intercept anything at all. German Squadron 2 realizes it's been very badly foxed as well. But what they can do, because the wind is still blowing in an easterly direction, is they can floor the pedal, spend one full fuel line, and go and occupy, basically zoom across and occupy the same hex as Squadron 1. Squadron 3 over here has no option but to land because their fuel is basically on empty. So they land, they refuel, but because they have landed on a bombed and strafed airfield, there's a victory point penalty for them. So for the British, it's... yes, there we go. They get a victory point for the German night fighters having to land in on a damaged field. Now, Squadron 4, what to do with Squadron 4? Because they are up in the North Sea. It's becoming increasingly unlikely the British are going to turn outward, but they may do just to cause confusion and bewilderment. It's sometimes very hard to know with the Brits. Also, I don't know really. It's part of the problem is I laid the course cards out last night and I can't actually remember what I did. Not that the Germans would know anyway. So I think because there's no other good move, just in case the British are trying something a bit funny, the Germans will keep pace with them. They won't burn so much fuel because they're traveling with the wind, and they'll just watch out in case the British decide to give themselves a flak break, as it were, by going round. And the final German squadron, which is 5, is going to do the same thing. It's going to parallel their course. So they're down to 4.5. And they are just going to move from Emden over to Hamburg, just in case the British are being suicidally brave and are just going to carry on following the flak trail. So that is the German night fighters. And what are the British bombers going to do? The poor spoof raid, poor long-suffering spoof raid, is in fact going to carry on trundling bravely eastwards. Oh, but before they do, I want to activate one final German defence. You were probably wondering what this shield is on the ground near the British main raid. It is in fact the German Wild Sow interceptors. So they are going to activate at this point as the main raid is passing overhead. And effectively, these daylight single-engined fighters are going to just do a quick pop-up and intercept the British bombers. So they have a 2 victory point base score. They have a further 2 if it's over the target city, but it's not. They were just taking advantage. It's not summer or a full moon, and it's +1 VP if there was a searchlight there, which there isn't. And it's also -2 VP for clouds. Oh, that would give them a net 0. Do you know what? Actually, apologies, everyone. I'm going to change my mind and cancel that order because there's no point the Wild Sow scrambling this turn. They might as well wait for a better opportunity. So yes, apologies for that. Let's just go straight to the bombers and see what they were up to. My apologies to the Germans for my terrible forgetfulness. So the spoof raid carries on into Hamburg, which is also not the target of their raid, so they're just going to endure a lot of pain. Let me just steady that camera while I bring the list back up. So the poor Brits have flown into flak defences again. Ow. And what is there? All the usual stuff. Heavy flak, searchlights. Okay, so fighter opposition plus heavy flak. No clouds over Hamburg, which is horrible. One of those two, they get a benefit from the searchlight and the radar. And nobody is at low altitude. It is the spoof raid, so it's -1. So the Germans get 4 victory points, which means that they are now leading with 2. So that was a bit of a painful one for the Brits. What about the main raid? If I turn the camera down here. The main raid is now turning eastwards again. Where could the Brits be heading? And so lastly, having finished the bombers, we now go to the V weapons. First, I'll check the card. Oops, sorry, I've got these done wrong. One sec. Sorry, I dropped the pile and had to reshuffle it. And the Germans are launching their 3rd one. Green is taking off this turn. And yellow and blue are going to be moving. Let me do blue first. So blue's target, the German player reveals the counter they would have secretly chosen at the beginning of the game. The target is Birmingham. And the V weapons move 2 spaces every turn. So that was actually very cleverly chosen. It is going to zoom straight over to Birmingham. Now it passes over the Mosquito, or past the Mosquito. So the British do get a victory point for it. Weather doesn't affect that. So yes, the Brits get 2 victory points for that. And over Birmingham, it passes a radar tower, but there's no other accompanying defences. So yeah, the British get 2 victory points. But the Germans get Germans get 6 for the value of Birmingham as a target, and there's no other modifiers. So there we go. So 4 in the Germans' favour, net result. And that V weapon goes away. It's out of play now. Now, where is yellow going? Oops. dropping the counters. Yellow is headed for London. Oh no. Again, they move 2 hexes, so it goes 1, suffers from 2 victory point loss for the mosquito intercepting, and then goes for London. Now, London does have radar and flak batteries, so the British do get a 1 for the flak batteries. Nothing for the radar, unfortunately, because they're coming in a bit too low, and there's no searchlights over London, which is a pain. So yes, aggregate total is three victory points for the British. But unfortunately, the Germans get another 6 for hitting London. So ow. So the Germans get another 3 altogether, and they're now leading by 9 victory points. So there we go. The Germans have managed to pull ahead. I'm going to leave this one here, and I'll resume as soon as I get a moment to carry on playing. But things are hotting up now. So the Germans have largely shot their bolt. Most of their V weapons have gone. They do have 1 left that's just taken off, but that will then be the end of their offensive activity, and they can concentrate on defense. The British are still trundling towards their unknown targets, but the poor spoof raid is having an absolute devil of a time, but thankfully the main raid is not. So I look forward to seeing how this one's going to pan out. Thank you guys, as always, for watching this and following the series. Great to have your company, and I look forward to more. Do take care, and thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Bye!